Just a quick review of what happened last week, what we talked about. And that is that I wanted to show the events that are involved around the time of the Abomination of Desolation. We've learned that there's a timeline of a 7-year period known as the Daniel's 70th week. And in the midst of that week, there is this event that's referred to as the Abomination of Desolation. And one of the things that is surrounding, the characteristics that we was looking for is that the Antichrist, he's going to go into the temple and he's going to blaspheme God. And he's going to basically declare himself to be above any god. And so, so we got to add a second item here that the Antichrist is essentially going to he's going to demand to be worshipped. He's going to set up the abomination that maketh desolate. We learned that armies are going to compass Jerusalem at that time. And we also seen some other events, such as there's going to be a time of trouble, such as not was since the beginning of the world around that time as well. And then there was events that were preceding the Abomination of Desolation that was very clear in a lot of the passages that talk about that there's going to be the oblation and the sacrifice is going to be caused to cease. And we've seen that there's going to be a lot of wars and there's going to be some conquering that's going to take place before that Abomination of Desolation happens. So today we're still going to continue looking at other places in the Bible that talk about this Abomination of Desolation and seeing these events being carried out in other places of the Bible in order to get, as much of an understanding as we can. And we ended last week at Daniel chapter 12. And I just want to start out by reading that whole chapter. So if you'll turn with me to Daniel chapter 12. And then after we read that, we're going to go to Revelation chapter 10. So if you kind of want to get in those two places. But we'll start out in the Old Testament here, Daniel chapter 12. I guess Daniel, he would be the last of the major prophets. Before then, you start getting into the minor prophets. And so there's 11 verses here in Daniel chapter 12. And just to recap, I think I'll start reading a little bit out of Daniel chapter 11. Because kind of the things that end of chapter 11 it gets picked up in Daniel chapter 12. But talking about an Antichrist, I'll just read a few verses. Let's see. Okay. About the Antichrist in Daniel chapter 11, verse 36, just as a reminder, it says, "And the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things." Okay, so picking up after that event, starting in Daniel chapter 12, we'll start reading. "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, or forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half, when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. All these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,330 days. But go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So one thing I want to point out, there's a lot in here that we could focus on, and I don't want to focus on this whole chapter. But we do have the marker here that it talks about from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, that there's going to be 1,290 days. I believe that means until the end of those wonders. And that is approximately 3.5 years. It's actually 30 days extra, and I think there's a reason for that, and that is a long message in and of itself. But a lot of times you'll see 42 months, and you'll see 1,260 days, and if you do the math on that, you're going to get 3.5 years. Here, this is 3.5 years plus an extra 30 days. And so probably one of the messages in the future are going to be on how all these times kind of work. But we see that from the time that this happens until the time of the end, we're looking at 1,290 days. And that's interesting. But the part that I want us to focus on that I believe has a close... let me start by saying this. He says, he don't understand. Daniel's talking about how he don't understand. And he says, Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So here I think you have a foretelling of the fact that you're going to have a New Testament. And we see that you're going to get especially the book of Revelation. And I want to show you in Revelation chapter 10 how something in here is going to correlate. And so before we leave, I want you to focus on verse number 7. It says, And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So the description here, I want you to kind of get this, that, he's looking at a man. Actually, he's looking, I think, at two men that are kind of talking to each other, and one is on one side of the bank of the river, and the other is on the other side of the bank of the river. And then we see one of them, and he holds both hands up to heaven, and he swear by him that liveth forever and ever. And, he says all that. So kind of keep that in your mind as we look at Revelation chapter 10. Okay, so if you've turned there, we're going to look at verses 1 through 7 in Revelation chapter 10. And it says, "And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot on the earth. And he cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. And when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write, and when I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not." So we don't know what the 7 thunders have uttered, and I don't think there's any way to figure it out. I mean, it's clear that it's saying, hey, I want those things sealed. So I think we're going to have to wait until we die and go to heaven to figure that out. But I'm really interested, and I want to know. But here's where the next verse here, it says, "And in the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven, and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things that which are therein, that there should be time no longer. And in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets." So can you guys see how there's a similarity between the angel who spoke with Daniel? There was 2 of them. You have the one on this side of the river and the one on the other side of the river. One of them asks the other, hey, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And that angel back in Daniel, standing on the riverbank, he lifts both hands up to heaven, and he swears by him that liveth forever and ever, that I think from the time of the abomination that maketh desolate, until the end, it's going to be, 3.5 years. Well, here, you have the same situation. You have this angel, and he has such a colorful description in the beginning, but he's got 1 foot on the sea, 1 foot on the earth, and he raises his hand up to heaven and swear by him that liveth forever and ever. And he says that, let's see how he puts it. He says that, he says that there should be no time no longer, but in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished. So it's telling us here that the time that shall be no longer, that's another way that I believe it's saying that at that point when the voice of the 7th angel occurs, that something is being finished. And it's letting us know exactly what the marker is that causes the end of the Antichrist's rule. He's given to be like ruling the earth for 42 months. And that is going to come to an end at the voice of the 7th trumpet. And I kind of got to laugh, because most of this time that we're going to find out is that when the Antichrist is ruling, the majority of that is while God is just pouring his wrath. And when we go over all of the trumpet judgments and the wrath of God, that is the majority of the time of those 42 months. And so he's not going to have much to rule over. It's going to be a terrible thing that people who are left to face God's wrath are going through. And we don't like to think of those things and the death and destruction that's going to happen to people. But in here, we're going to see that people who are up in heaven, they're going to say that this is just and that it's right. And one of the judgments that people are going to face is that, there's going to be the fresh water of rivers and lakes are going to be turned into blood. And the people up in heaven are looking at that. And the angel, I think, says, they killed the saints. These people they put to death, and they caused so much bloodshed, and it's just that they should have to drink that blood. And so we as Christians ought to understand that God's judgment is righteous, and the things that he is going to bring forth, it may be hard to read about, but it's right. The people that are left to have that judgment, they do deserve that. And God is right. He's merciful. He's been merciful for so long, but there's going to be a point where his mercy will end. And so I just would kind of like to look at Revelation chapter 11 real quick and actually look at what happens at the seventh trump. Now we're going to go into the seventh trump with a lot of detail. We're going to look at all of the trumps and all of the vials of God's judgment in a lot of detail. But let's look at what happens when the voice of the seventh trumpet occurs. Okay, let's start here. Okay, I'm trying to find my place. Okay, it starts in verse 15. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." And the 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshipped God, saying, "We give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken thy great power and hast reigned. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and a time of the dead that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants, the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of the testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail." So at the voice of the seventh trumpet, that's when the Bible is revealing to us that is the moment when all of the kingdoms of the earth are now going to become the kingdoms of Jesus, our Lord, and he's going to start ruling and reigning. And so that's what I think these angels are talking about, All right, so that's Revelation chapter 7, and chapter 10, verses 1 through 7. I wanted you to see the connection between the two angels having the conversation and the one angel who puts his one foot on the sea and the other foot on the dry land. Okay, there's some other things that I want to talk about, and we're going to look at Revelation chapter 11 earlier in the passage. And this is going to be about some of the the timing that we see. So let's look at Revelation chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. And it says, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 40 months. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." So, Rob, you got your phone on you and with a calculator? Would you go ahead and divide 42 by 12? 3.5. So that's 3.5 years. And then it talks about the 2 witnesses. They're going to prophesy 1,260 days. That's 1,260. So let's go ahead and divide 1,260 by 360, I believe. 3.5. So these timings are I'm wanting to everybody to see those to help support the idea that this is a 7-year period. And so I believe these 2 things happen and start, they begin at the same time that the Antichrist does the Abomination of Desolation. And at that time, it talks about how there's going to be the Gentiles are going to be treading the holy city underfoot for 42 months. And I think that is going, if you look at the book of Luke, you're going to find that that's also talked about. It talks about how during the abomination, you're going to see armies encompass the holy city, and then the Gentiles shall tread underfoot. And so it's telling us that it's going to be desolate, but the Gentiles are going to be there for 42 months. And then also, we see that there's going to be 2 witnesses, and they are going to be prophesying during that time when the Antichrist is going to be ruling and reigning while he's also getting pummeled by God's wrath. So, I thought it was important to understand these timings. In Revelation chapter 12, so then just the next chapter over, starting in verses 6 and 7, it talks about, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels." And let's go down to just verse 14 in the same chapter. And it says, "And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent." So here we see that the serpent, which is also known as the devil, Satan, the great dragon, we're going to see all those descriptions being given to Satan. He is full of wrath, and he's persecuting this woman. So kind of have that picture. We talked about this, I think, in the very first sermon, about how this is a highly symbolic chapter. And so the woman represents something. And the devil is persecuting the woman. The woman also had brought forth the man-child, and that was Christ Jesus. And it talked about how he, was caught up to the Lord, and he was cut off, and all those things. But let's look at verses 15 through 17 in the same chapter. And it says, "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So I think this particular part of the passage is key to really understanding who we're talking about. Because there's a particular seed of the woman that keep the testimony of Jesus Christ, and they keep the commandments of God. They have the testimony of Jesus Christ, and they keep the commandments of God. And see, at first, the serpent, he's trying to destroy the whole woman. And he fails to do so. And so then he just focused his efforts on just going after the remnant of her seed, which have the testimony of Jesus Christ and keep the commandments. Well, that sounds like Christians, because they have the testimony of Jesus Christ. They worship Jesus. They believe on Jesus. And if we go over to Revelation chapter 13, if you'll just turn over there, let's look at verse 1. And this passage, you're going to see that really Revelation chapter 13 is all about the abomination of desolation. So when we start looking at the things that occur here, you're going to see a lot of similarities of the things that we talked about earlier. Things like the blasphemy. And it says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." Drop down to verses 5 through 8. And it says, "And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies." And it says, "And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So what did we read in Daniel a while back ago? It says from the time of the abomination of desolation until the end, there's going to be 42 months, or time and times and a half a time. But it all equals the same amount of time. So we understand that at the time of this, we're talking about the time of the abomination of desolation. So why is this important? Well, when we look back at what happened in Revelation chapter 12, we see that the dragon is wroth with the woman, and he cannot destroy the woman. The earth helps the woman, and then he focuses on going after the remnant of her seed. And so in the very next chapter, it talks about how power is given to this beast to continue for 42 months. And it says, "And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." So the dragon fails to destroy the woman. The earth helps the woman. And so then the dragon is going to go after the remnant of her seed. And so in the very next breath, he gives this power to this beast. And it's given to him to continue for 42 months. And 42 months. And the thing that he's supposed to do, this Antichrist, is to make war with the saints. So him making war with the saints is the result of the dragon given the Antichrist, or the beast, his great power and authority. It's specifically to go after the remnant of the seed that keep the testimony of Jesus Christ. So why is that important? Well, if we go back to the last chapter, it talks about, that the woman, let's see. It says, "The woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. So I believe this 3.5 year period that's talked about in Revelation chapter 12 is going to be the first 3.5 years where there is a lot of wars and a lot of things that are happening, where the dragon is causing a lot of trouble and he's starting to give his power to the Antichrist, and there's a lot of death and a lot of things that we're going to see when we get to that part in the study. So that this part that's being talked about in Revelation chapter 12 is the first 3.5 years. And then when the dragon sees he can't destroy the woman, he goes after the remnant of her seed. He gives the power to the Antichrist. He's given power to continue for 42 months, and his job is to make war with the saints. And that is going to that's going to be the second half of the 7-year period, the second 3.5 years. Does that all make sense to everybody? Okay, so let's read a little bit more about Revelation. And let's look down at chapter 13 again, and we're going to look at verses 11 through 15. Okay, so it says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." Okay, so let's talk about the summary here. The characteristics of the abomination of desolation. We see that the sacrifice and the oblation are caused to cease. We learned that in the book of Daniel. It happens right at the time of the abomination of desolation. Then it talks about he places the abomination that maketh desolate. So there's actually an image that's set up. And what we just read here in Revelation chapter 13 in verses 11 through 15, that has to do with the image that's set up. And we see the purpose of this image is that everybody is going to be made to worship the image. And that those that don't worship the image, they're going to be put to death. So who is it that's not going to be worshiping the image? It's going to be Christians, people who recognize what's going on, and they're not going to do it. And, even those Christians, like when we talked about the warnings, the whole reason why we study the book of Revelation and study the prophecy, it's to, kind of understand these things. But I'm certain, this is not a fact what I'm getting ready to say, but I feel pretty certain that even those Christians who are saved but they're not paying attention, when this stuff happens, when they're saved, if you're saved but you're kind of asleep, you're not going to recognize, you're not going to think that this guy needs to be worshiped. The whole purpose of the beast having his power is he wants to make war with the saints. He's not trying to just get people to lose their salvation, which is impossible. If we go back to Matthew chapter 24, when it's talking about this time period, it's saying that there's going to be signs and miracles, but if it were possible, they would deceive even the very elect. And when you read something that says, if it were possible, that means that it's not possible. So people who are saved, they're just not going to be able to do it. But I think the purpose is that the Antichrist wants to kill. I mean, that's what that's what his purpose is. It's to make war with the saints. And so he's not interested in getting people to the impossible there. He just wants to destroy the saints. That's what he's wanting to do. He hates us. So, but there's going to be a lot of miracles and signs, and fire is going to be made to come down from heaven. And if you read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, God is also going to send people strong delusion at that time. So, this world is in a bad shape the way it is right now, and it's very, very important that we reach people and get as many people saved as we can. I mean, that has got to be the most important thing that we need to do. So the characteristics of the abomination that we talked about here, the sacrifice and the oblation are caused to cease. He places the abomination that makes desolate. That's an image that's set up that people actually have to worship. And believe it or not, this is not the first time in history that this has happened. If you go back to, I think, Daniel chapter 3, you're going to see that there is a statue that Nebuchadnezzar has built, and then there's going to be some music that gets played. And then at that time, everybody is supposed to get down on their hands and knees and they're going to worship them, but Daniel doesn't do it. And he gets thrown into the fiery furnace. And so this is not a first time in history. This is what happens when you have empire with somebody that's an antichrist. And it's kind of a repeating of history. It's the devil's, it's just a pattern of what he does. So the next thing that we need to recognize that's a characteristic of the abomination of desolation that we can see here in Revelation chapter 13 is that he magnifies himself above every god, and he speaks marvelous things against the God of gods. So that's the blasphemy. And then I want to just point out some things that happened prior. If we go back to what we read earlier, the Antichrist uses deception, and he obtains the kingdom by flatteries. He makes a league and a covenant, and then he kind of breaks that covenant by working deceitfully. He says he conquers through peace. I kind of remember reading that. And that's going to lead into war. So those are the things that are kind of going to happen prior that we've learned in the book of Daniel. After, it says that there's going to be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. Okay, so there's going to be a time of trouble. And then, of course, I want you to see that in Matthew 24. Okay. All right, so let's start in verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understandeth. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as what was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So you have the abomination of desolation. We've learned through Luke and through Daniel that at the time that the abomination occurs, that arms are going to stand on his part. And they're going to make the holy city, Jerusalem, desolate. So there's this warning to those people who are in Jerusalem to get out. And he's like, if you're on the housetop, just get down and get out. If you're in the field, don't go back to get anything. Just get out, because the desolation thereof is nigh. And so there's that warning just to those people in Jerusalem to get out, because that's where the image is set up. That's where the desolation happens. But he says at that time, after the abomination, it says, then shall be, I want to get that right. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So that is, you got the abomination of desolation, and then after that is the great tribulation begins. And that'll be the next thing that we put up there. And just let me find the paper here. All right. Thank you. So next week, the thing that I'm really looking forward to is we're going to start off in Revelation chapter 6, and we're going to study the seals. And we're going to look at how what's called the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, the beginning of each one of those books, how they compare to Revelation chapter 6. And I'm really looking forward to it. All right. Let's see. So I'm all done with the message tonight, and it's just now 7:01.